The Buffalo Sabres traded back and had a productive draft this weekend. Joe DiBiasi of Locked On Sabres is here to talk about what they accomplished and what still needs to be done in free agency. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It is great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Sabres, Joe DiBiasi. And Joe, were you surprised at all by the trade that the Sabres made to move back a few spots in the draft and then with the selection of Konsta Helenius?
I would definitely say I was surprised at the timing. Little weird that you get a trade like that the day before the draft, a draft pick trade where you're moving down 3 spots. Value-wise, like I have no surprise that they would have said yes to it. You move down from pick 11 to pick 14, you pick up a second-round pick in exchange. That kind of seems like a no-brainer, unless you have someone that you are so obsessed with. But again, like my thought would have been, how do you know the day before what the board is going to look like there? The Sharks had some idea of what it was going to look like. They had the gumption to do that one day before, Mike Greer, the Sharks GM, doing it. So yeah, surprised by the timing. If it had happened during the draft, I would have said no. Because again, otherwise I thought the trade made sense from a value perspective, not from a need perspective. They have the strongest prospect pool, or, you know, at least one of the strongest prospect pools. They're never ranked below the bottom or the top 3 on that front. So they didn't need another pick, but for 3 spots, you take it.
What does Helenius add to the prospect pool of the Buffalo Sabres?
I like him a lot for what he will fill in. They've got a lot of skill. They've got a lot of speed, not a lot of size. And not that Helenius checks all the opposite boxes there. He really does help, though. He will fill a center role. Let's say everything goes well and all of these guys hit, and they won't all, but you hope maybe 70% of them do if you're really good at it. And if that happens, you've got guys like Matt Savoy, small, speed, skilled center that also plays the wing. Yuri Kulik, who's got an awesome shot and is a hard-working two-way guy, but the sniper part of his game on the power play is so valuable. You've got a Zach Benson right now who's already made the NHL. The playmaking is on display there. You've got all of this skill, top 6 type of forwards littered through the prospect pool. They didn't really have a guy like this. They didn't have a, hey, this guy is going to eventually be Sam Bennett is a comparison that I've seen for him, where he's very hard to play against. He's going to be in your face during and after the whistle. He is going to put the puck in the back of the net for you. He does have skill. At the same time, though, the two-way game, his defensive acumen, his responsibilities in his own end, there is so much there. He was doing that. I think it's really what allowed him to have the role he did in the Finnish Elite League, or the Liga they call it now, where he's playing in a men's league and he's playing kind of a defensive role for his team. I think the maturity that says about him is super impressive, which is why I think you're hearing more and more of this guy might be NHL ready quicker than you think. Kevin Adams said the same thing, their GM who picked him. Like, this guy is not going to take long. And I think his two-way game, the maturity as a player really speaks to that. The other thing I would throw in about him very quickly is, while I think a lot of the scouts and even the way he's been talked about by those that have really watched him think, okay, the real value here is the all-around game, the defensive role, the physicality, even though he's not huge. But the numbers guys, the stat people that kind of track like what you do in the leagues before you get to the NHL, look at what he did, 36 points in 51 games in a men's league at 18 years old, 17 years old too, and think guys that do that have number one line ability offensively. So there is a group, and it's mostly the numbers guys that think even his offensive game has a really high ceiling.
Were you pleased with the way they used the extra second-round pick that they acquired and with the picks they made on day 2 of the draft?
So that's where I have a little bit of a question about what Adams did on, let's say, day 2 of draft day. He didn't trade the pick outright that he got for that trade. He got pick number 42 from the Sharks, and he did end up using that pick literally on a big defenseman. Adam Kleber filled another need in their prospect pool. They have so many left shot guys, no right shot guys to speak of whatsoever. He's big too. They have a skilled blue line in the NHL now and in the prospect pipeline, but they don't have a lot of size. So they had a 6'5" right shot defenseman who's big and physical, exactly what you would have thought. But what maybe allowed them to pick him and then also make a trade was having that extra pick. But what did they spend that extra second round pick on that they had? Beck Malenstein. Okay. 4th liner from the Capitals. Before even telling you anything about the player, usually doesn't sound good to a fan base when, hey guys, we traded a second round pick for an NHL player. Oh, cool. Let's look at what he is. 26 years old. He's played 105 games in the NHL, and he scored 6 goals last year. Like, what? I'm not saying second round picks are gold, but didn't Andrew Mangiapane get traded the other day for a second round pick? You get middle 6 players that get traded for second round picks all the time. And we got a 4th liner who has, before last year, wasn't even a regular NHL player. That was strange to me. I get what they're going for. They don't, same with the NHL club. I just talked about this with their other guys. They don't have a lot of tough to play against, size, physicality. This dude hits. It's a weird number. You won't hear it much in the analytics world, but hits per 60 minutes, right at the top of the league. So this dude's going to throw his weight around. He's a great shot blocker. He's a great penalty killer. So he definitely fills a spot. It's just, it feels like the type of player that usually gets traded for a 5th round pick, not a 2nd round pick.
Yeah, that does sound like a little bit of a reach, but it also sounds like it fills a need as well. What do you expect the Sabres to do when free agency starts noon on Monday?
It's a really good question. I mean, it could be anywhere from, I think there's really two outcomes that I'm bracing for, and I feel like Sabre fans are mentally bracing for, which is anywhere from total inaction, and that might be based more this year than ever, though, on their inability to attract good players. I really wonder, it's hard to know because not all this gets reported on. They wanted to make a trade this draft. They talked about it openly. Kevin Adams did, about wanting to trade pick number 11, at the time they had 11, for a proven, established veteran player. All the insiders, Friedman, LeBron, all of them are out there the weeks leading up to the draft saying that, they want a top 6 forward. They want a top 6 forward. They want a 3rd-line center. Like, they want these 2 things really badly this offseason. And then the draft comes and goes, no deal. Now, I know there weren't a lot of trades at all. Were there any trades in the first round? Maybe not for a player, right? There were some trade
not
ups.
for a player.
Yeah, there were trade ups, but they're not for a player. So I get that, but there is this worry right now, I think, here that, one, does the GM have the ability to make a trade like that? Because you could say all you want. You could show up to the car dealership and say, I want this SUV, but, I'm only willing to pay $12,000. Well, okay, they cost $30,000. So I guess you're not getting one. Like, there's a little bit of a worry that this GM just isn't willing to pay the price of what things cost to help your team improve. There's, especially when you have the best prospect pool, or one of them in the league, there's also a grave concern right now that this, I think, is real. I just wonder how often it gets in the way, that players don't want to play for the Sabres. We know of multiple trades that they've made in the last 12 to 18 months that were agreed upon, and then the players said no. Even players that aren't stars. A year and a half ago, they traded for Matt Murray, and then Matt Murray told them, no, I don't want to go there. At this trade deadline, I don't know who the exact player was, but there was a report, and actually Adams even kind of spoke to it, that they had a deal agreed upon for a 27-year-old defenseman, and then the player didn't want to come here. I get it. right? If you don't have a connection to Buffalo, if you don't know someone that plays on the team, or if you're not from here, like Alex Tuck, what's your sales pitch? I got a 13-year playoff drought. A lot of these players in the league now are 24, 25. They probably don't even remember the Sabres in the playoffs, let alone them being even like really good, like going deep for runs. So the reputation of the club is so far down. I just don't know what their ability is to get players to waive their no trade clause. I assume sitting here right now that every player in the league that has a no trade clause, which I looked this up this week, is 22% of the league. Wow. And that 22% is the better 22% of the league. I have to assume that 21% has the Sabres on their no trade clause, that there's very few that don't. So I got a GM that I don't know how he's able to make trades. I've got a league that I'm not assuming wants to come here. So that's the trade element. Now I wonder if they're going to go spend like crazy in free agency, overpay for guys to make up for it. And that could get you in trouble. So they could do nothing because they've done a lot of inaction the last couple of years, or I'm mentally bracing for they're going to go give out a really bad contract, even if it's for a good player, where NHL Twitter is going to go, oh, what did the Sabres just give him?
We shall see. I know you'll have it covered every step of the way. Joe, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find the podcast and where they can find you on social media?
Definitely. So Locked On Sabres, wherever you're listening to podcasts, YouTube as well. You got me on Twitter at Sneaky Joe Sports. You can follow me there. And we also have our Locked On Sabres text line, which for the diehard Sabre fans and casual too, if you want to get the scoop, join subtext.com/Locked On Sabres. We're always texting throughout the day, free agency day especially.
All right, Joe, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Check out the odds on your favorite baseball team. Maybe take a look at some football futures or use your knowledge of hockey to find some great bets on FanDuel. Head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.